There are machines that don't just move us, they transform how we think about speed, precision, and the limits of human connection with technology. You can hear it before you see it. A sharp, rising wail that feels alive, like it's inhaling the world and exhaling pure adrenaline. It's not just a vehicle. It's a statement that engineering can have a soul, and that courage on the edge of control can rewrite history. This story isn't about luxury or comfort. It's about what happens when ambition meets the racetrack, and a team decides that second place will never be enough. Because sometimes the difference between failure and immortality is one machine tuned to perfection and one rider willing to risk everything to prove it. Stay tuned as we explore the legend that changed MotoGP forever. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment on which iconic machine you want to see next. When Yamaha unveiled the YZR-M1 in 2004, few could have predicted that it would become the defining MotoGP machine of its era. At that time, Yamaha was desperate for redemption, a brand rich in racing heritage but struggling to keep up with the dominant competition. The YZR-M1 was their moonshot, built not from arrogance but necessity. Its purpose was simple yet audacious: to create a motorcycle that could translate rider feedback into lap times so seamlessly that it would feel like an extension of the human body. In those early days, the M1 wasn't perfect. It was unpredictable, with an engine that lacked the raw aggression of its rivals and a chassis that demanded patience to understand. But Yamaha's engineers, guided by the quiet confidence of their test riders, believed in a new philosophy: build a bike that listens to its rider rather than forcing the rider to adapt. That idea would become the DNA of the YZR-M1. To understand how it came to life, we need to rewind to the environment that birthed it. In the early 2000s, MotoGP was entering a new age. Two-stroke monsters were being replaced by four-stroke prototypes, and manufacturers were scrambling to find the balance between brute power and manageable control. Yamaha's earlier efforts, like the YZR-500, had been brilliant but temperamental, requiring razor-sharp precision to extract results. The M1's mission was to evolve beyond that, to take Yamaha's race-winning legacy and translate it into the new four-stroke world. Inside Yamaha's racing division, the design brief was as daring as it was specific. Build a four-stroke that's smooth, linear, and endlessly adaptable. Instead of chasing the highest horsepower, the engineers focused on balance and communication. They positioned the inline-four engine crosswise, optimizing weight distribution to improve handling mid-corner. The goal was to let the rider brake later, lean deeper, and accelerate sooner without feeling like the bike was fighting back. The YZR-M1's character started to take shape around this idea of rider harmony. Yamaha's development team, working under tight deadlines, experimented relentlessly with frame stiffness, throttle response, and weight placement. Every test revealed something new: small adjustments that turned instability into stability, hesitation into confidence. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was foundational. In 2003, the M1 debuted and showed promise, but it still lacked that final spark, that chemistry between man and machine. That's when Valentino Rossi entered the story. His decision to leave the dominant Honda team to join Yamaha in 2004 was more than a transfer. It was a test of belief. Rossi brought not only championship-winning experience, but an intuitive understanding of how a motorcycle should feel. Almost immediately, he began shaping the M1 into his ideal tool. He demanded smoother power delivery, predictable throttle control, and a chassis that responded to the subtlest body shift. Yamaha listened. The engineers reworked the engine's firing order, introducing a crossplane crankshaft concept that delivered linear torque instead of peaky bursts. It was a revelation. The bike suddenly felt alive, connected, and intuitive. Rossi could sense traction through his fingertips, and that made all the difference. His feedback loop with the engineering team became legendary, a synergy that transformed the YZR-M1 from an underdog into a champion within a single season. The 2004 MotoGP opener in South Africa was the proof. Rossi, riding the newly refined YZR-M1, won on his debut for Yamaha, silencing every critic who had doubted the move. That victory wasn't just a race win. It was a statement that a well-balanced machine and a rider's vision could dethrone dominance. It validated Yamaha's rider-first philosophy and set a new standard for how factory teams collaborated with their stars. Over the next few seasons, Yamaha continued refining the M1's DNA. Each year brought incremental improvements, lighter materials, refined aerodynamics, and better electronics, but the core philosophy never changed. The YZR-M1 was never about brute force. It was about making a motorcycle that obeyed every instinct. That subtle distinction defined its character and influenced generations of Yamaha machines that followed. In racing paddocks around the world, the M1 became known as the thinking rider's bike. Its design rewarded finesse over aggression and precision over power. In the hands of Rossi, it looked effortless. But beneath that grace was an intricate web of engineering logic that prioritized communication above all else. For Yamaha's engineers, that meant endless data analysis, late nights of frame tuning, and tireless attention to detail. But it worked. By 2005, the YZR-M1 had become the benchmark for balance, consistency, and rider confidence. The story of its creation isn't just about building a motorcycle, it's about redefining the relationship between technology and intuition. The YZR-M1 became proof that machines could be empathetic, responding not only to mechanical input, but to human intent. And yet, as Yamaha's dominance grew, so did the challenges. Rivals began studying the M1's behavior, analyzing its geometry, its throttle response, and even its firing sequence. The war wasn't over, it had only begun. In the next chapter, we'll explore how the YZR-M1 evolved under pressure, faced new competition, and continued to push the limits of MotoGP innovation year after year. As the Yamaha YZR-M1 entered its middle years, the motorcycle had already established itself as a weapon of precision, a balance of art and engineering that transformed the way riders approached MotoGP. Yet maintaining dominance in the world's most competitive racing series meant constant evolution. By 2006, every rival manufacturer had dissected the M1's success, searching for weaknesses to exploit. Yamaha's answer wasn't more horsepower, it was refinement. Engineers returned to the same principles that had made the YZR-M1 a champion: rider feedback, adaptability, and predictability. But as competition intensified, those ideals were harder to preserve. Every fraction of a second counted. The YZR-M1 of the late 2000s began incorporating increasingly sophisticated electronics, traction control, engine mapping, and data-driven telemetry that allowed engineers to fine-tune the machine in ways never before possible. Rossi, along with teammates like Colin Edwards and later Jorge Lorenzo, became test pilots as much as racers, exploring how far technology could enhance human ability without overpowering it. Yamaha's Crossplane engine remained its signature, delivering that unmistakable linear thrust that kept the rear tire gripping even under brutal acceleration. But with every update, the stakes rose higher. The 2006 season was grueling. New tire regulations, shifting team dynamics, and the relentless pace of development forced Yamaha to rethink how it evolved the M1. The team realized that the core advantage wasn't just the bike's setup, it was how quickly they could adapt. Data flowed from racetrack to factory overnight, and within weeks new components would arrive, shaped by both science and instinct. The YZR-M1 became a living organism, constantly learning and mutating in response to every challenge. By the time Jorge Lorenzo joined the team in 2008, the YZR-M1 had entered its next phase of identity. Rossi's fluid style demanded a forgiving chassis, while Lorenzo's precision required razor-sharp stability. Somehow, Yamaha managed to accommodate both, producing a platform that could suit two vastly different champions. That flexibility became the ultimate testament to the M1's design philosophy, its ability to translate human individuality into speed. Meanwhile, in the broader MotoGP paddock, the arms race for electronic sophistication had begun. Other manufacturers pushed for aggressive power delivery, banking on software to keep their bikes in line. Yamaha resisted the temptation to abandon its human-centered DNA. The engineers saw the YZR-M1 as a partnership, not a robot. They refined traction algorithms to feel natural, tuned engine braking to mimic intuition, and ensured that even with computers on board, the rider remained the decision-maker. It was a delicate balance. Too much assistance would dull the sensation of control. Too little would cost precious tenths per lap. That balancing act became Yamaha's edge. In 2008, Rossi reclaimed the MotoGP crown aboard the YZR-M1, proving that consistency and confidence could still defeat raw aggression. The following year, Yamaha repeated the feat, with the M1 claiming both the riders' and constructors' titles. In those seasons, the motorcycle wasn't just competitive, it was dominant. Its silhouette, sleek and poised, became synonymous with control under pressure. But as every dynasty learns, evolution invites resistance. The early 2010s introduced a new era of competition, different tire suppliers, new fuel limits, and a field of hungry young riders eager to dethrone the legends. The YZR-M1 faced a crossroads. It could cling to its identity or reinvent itself again. Yamaha chose reinvention. Engineers reworked the aerodynamics to suit changing regulations, refined the frame to accommodate new riding styles, and updated the electronics to deliver smoother transitions between traction states. What remained constant was the philosophy. Every improvement had to serve the rider, not the other way around. Even as Rossi briefly left for another team, the M1 continued to evolve under Lorenzo's precision. His feedback helped refine the front-end feel and corner entry stability that became Yamaha trademarks. Each iteration of the YZR-M1 was the result of countless test laps, data streams, and late-night engineering sessions where fractions of millimeters decided entire championships. The machine's reputation became almost mythic, not the most powerful but the most complete. In MotoGP, that completeness is often the hardest thing to achieve. The YZR-M1's chassis balance, linear power curve, and forgiving nature made it the go-to reference point for teams trying to design the perfect compromise. Meanwhile, Yamaha's consistency turned into cultural currency. Fans began to see the M1 as a symbol of endurance amid chaos, the quiet weapon that kept rewriting what smoothness could do in a sport obsessed with aggression. It wasn't just winning races. It was shaping how MotoGP itself evolved. Engineers from other teams acknowledged that Yamaha's rider-first approach had set a new standard for feedback-driven development. Even as aerodynamics and electronics began dominating the conversation, the YZR-M1 reminded everyone that connection still mattered, that instinct and trust couldn't be replaced by software. Through the late 2010s and into the early 2020s, the M1 continued to adapt. The sport shifted toward inline-4 parity and aerodynamic battles. Yet Yamaha stayed true to its balanced DNA. Riders like Maverick Viñales and Fabio Quartararo carried the torch, showcasing how that same foundational harmony could still deliver victories in a field filled with rocket ships. The YZR-M1's consistency across decades wasn't luck, it was legacy. Its evolution mirrored the story of MotoGP itself. From mechanical art to digital warfare, yet still bound by the human hand on the throttle. Every curve of its fairing, every line of telemetry, told a story of a machine built not to dominate through brute strength, but to amplify the person in control. And yet, for all its triumphs, the YZR-M1's journey wasn't without struggle. As other manufacturers introduced radical aerodynamic packages and new engine architectures, Yamaha's measured approach faced criticism. Some called it conservative, others called it pure, but the truth lay somewhere in between. The YZR-M1 had never been about chasing trends, it had always been about perfecting fundamentals. As we move forward, the question becomes not whether it can keep up, but whether it can continue to define what MotoGP means. And to answer that, we have to look at how the YZR-M1's philosophy continues to shape the future of both Yamaha and the sport itself. A story that unfolds in the next segment, where legacy meets modern relevance. The Yamaha YZR-M1 stands today as a living monument to evolution, proof that a motorcycle built around balance and feedback can survive in a world obsessed with brute power and aerodynamics. By the time the M1 reached its modern incarnations in the 2020s, it had carried multiple generations of champions, each imprinting their style on its DNA. Valentino Rossi's fluid aggression, Jorge Lorenzo's metronomic precision, and Fabio Quartararo's explosive corner exits, all of them shaped how the YZR-M1 felt, responded, and won. And yet, despite technological revolutions sweeping MotoGP, the soul of the YZR-M1 never changed. Yamaha's engineers refused to let the machine become just another data-driven prototype. They kept its purpose pure: amplify the rider's instincts, reward smoothness, and deliver confidence through connection. That consistency became both its strength and its challenge. As rivals adopted radical new aero fairings, whole-shot devices, and seamless transmissions, the M1 sometimes seemed old school. Critics argued that Yamaha's commitment to balance came at the expense of raw speed. But the engineers behind the YZR-M1 saw the bigger picture. They were preserving a lineage, not just a lap time. They understood that in racing, technology fades fast, but feel endures. The M1's feel, its uncanny ability to communicate grip, load, and stability, became its calling card. Riders could sense traction limits before they arrived, making the Yamaha one of the most forgiving yet precise bikes in the field. That quality made it a favorite among purists and engineers alike. In an era when MotoGP machines became increasingly complex, the YZR-M1 remained accessible in spirit. It spoke the same language it always had, the language of trust between man and machine. Yamaha's consistency with the M1 also had a cultural impact beyond the racetrack. In garages across the world, street riders and engineers drew inspiration from its design philosophy. Supersport and leader bike models bearing Yamaha's tuning fork logo began incorporating the same principles that made the M1 dominant: predictable throttle response, linear torque, and chassis communication. The M1 wasn't just racing, it was rewriting the blueprint for Yamaha's road bikes from the R6 to the R1 and beyond. For fans, the M1 became something more than a motorcycle. It became an idea, a symbol of what happens when technology and intuition coexist rather than collide. Every time the bike lined up on a grid, there was an understanding that the person on it mattered as much as the machine beneath them. That was the Yamaha difference, and it showed. The partnership between Rossi and the YZR-M1 redefined what it meant for a rider to develop a bike, but the story didn't end there. When Fabio Quartararo took Yamaha to a MotoGP World Championship in 2021, nearly 2 decades after Rossi's first victory with the same lineage, it proved the concept's resilience. Different rider, different era, same philosophy, and still capable of winning on the world's biggest stage. Yet longevity always comes with adaptation. The modern YZR-M1 is now at a crossroads where mechanical purity meets digital precision. Yamaha's engineers face the challenge of keeping the bike's signature feel while integrating advanced aerodynamic systems and data analytics. They're experimenting with new intake configurations, weight distributions, and even frame flex technologies, all designed to maintain that balance between control and speed. The stakes are higher than ever. MotoGP is no longer a contest of horsepower alone. It's a chess game of aerodynamics, electronics, and psychological warfare. Still, through every rule change and innovation wave, the YZR-M1 remains Yamaha's philosophical constant. It reminds everyone watching that racing isn't only about breaking limits, it's about knowing exactly where they are. As the M1 continues to evolve, it carries an emotional weight few machines can claim. Its legacy lives not just in trophies, but in the thousands of small decisions, design tweaks, rider debriefs, engineering gambles that have defined its journey. It is a time capsule of how MotoGP transformed from analog to digital, from fearless instinct to measured precision, without losing the essence of what makes motorsport human. Today, when enthusiasts speak of the Yamaha YZR-M1, they're not just recalling victories, they're invoking an ideal, a machine that embodies respect between engineer and rider, one that doesn't command but collaborates. In a world where everything is becoming automated, the M1 remains refreshingly human. That's its true achievement. The YZR-M1 isn't just Yamaha's flagship. It's the thread that connects generations of innovation, from the roaring 2000s to the algorithm-driven present. And as Yamaha eyes the next chapter, hybrid technologies, sustainable fuels, and even electric prototypes, the lessons of the M1 remain the same. Start with the rider, build outward, and never sacrifice feel for flash. The M1's influence will be felt long after its racing days end, shaping how Yamaha and the entire industry approach performance. And that's the beauty of legacy. It doesn't stop at the finish line. It evolves, just like the machine that built it. In our final segment, we'll look at what this means for riders, collectors, and fans today, how the Yamaha YZR-M1's heritage translates to ownership, access, and appreciation in the real world. For anyone who loves motorcycles, whether you ride, collect, or simply follow the sport, the Yamaha YZR-M1 represents something more than just a MotoGP machine. It's a benchmark for what happens when design, engineering, and human instinct converge around a single purpose: connection. Owning, studying, or even hearing the YZR-M1 run is to experience the distillation of 2 decades of pursuit. Every modern Yamaha sport bike, from the R6 to the R1, carries echoes of that pursuit. Chassis stiffness tuned for feedback, throttle response shaped by crossplane engineering, and the unmistakable focus on predictability over sheer aggression. The lessons that made the YZR-M1 great didn't stay on the racetrack. They filtered down into the road-going world, influencing how everyday riders experience control and trust. In the US, that's a big part of why Yamaha continues to hold loyalty among performance enthusiasts who care about feel as much as speed. For collectors, the YZR-M1's rarity and prestige make it a near-mythical artifact. Only factory teams and a handful of private museums have ever held authentic examples, but the spirit of the bike lives in limited edition tributes and racing replicas inspired by its lineage. These machines often borrow materials, color schemes, and mechanical philosophies directly from the M1's championship years, turning the idea of ownership into participation in a legacy. The demand for memorabilia, team fairings, engine components, signed leathers, remains strong because the M1 symbolizes a golden era when MotoGP balanced analog bravery with emerging digital control. For those considering a Yamaha sport bike today, the M1's influence is both visible and tangible. The Crossplane crankshaft technology that debuted to tame the M1's torque lives in the R1, giving riders that same linear, confidence-building power delivery that defined Rossi's early wins. Even electronics packages, ride modes, traction control, and slide management owe their logic to the data systems first refined in the M1 program. It means that when a modern Yamaha rider rolls onto a canyon road or track day, they're feeling the echoes of MotoGP refinement that started on circuits like Jerez and Phillip Island. Reliability, long a Yamaha hallmark, also reflects the lessons learned from the YZR-M1. Race engines taught engineers where stress peaks occur and how to manage heat, materials, and tolerances. The result is a brand reputation built not just on excitement but durability, something rare in high-performance machinery. For American riders seeking a balance of thrill and dependability, that heritage translates to real value. Of course, owning a true M1 isn't an option outside the factory circle, but appreciating what it stands for is accessible to everyone who rides or watches. It's about respecting the dialogue between man and machine, the shared language of throttle, lean, and trust. Even as MotoGP moves towards sustainable fuels and new engine formats, the philosophy behind the YZR-M1 remains timeless. Performance that feels natural, predictable, and deeply human. Ultimately, the Yamaha YZR-M1 story is a lesson in endurance, technological, cultural, and emotional. It shows that winning isn't just about building the fastest bike. It's about building the one that communicates best with its rider. That's a message that resonates far beyond racing paddocks, shaping how Yamaha builds every machine it sells and how riders understand performance itself. The YZR-M1 isn't simply a motorcycle. It's a reminder that perfection in motion isn't found in data or horsepower, but in harmony. And that harmony, once discovered, never fades. It just keeps evolving lap after lap,